He looked at her like she was nobody, some rookie nurse who didn't know her place. Big mistake. Because in the next 10 seconds, this decorated Navy SEAL would go down hard, flat on his back, in front of 960 stone-silent troops. Nobody in that hangar breathed. Nobody moved. Because when Commander Derek Holt slapped Lieutenant Nora Vasquez across the face that afternoon, he thought he was putting a nobody in her place. What he didn't know was that he'd just picked a fight with the wrong woman on the wrong day, in front of the wrong crowd. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She stood there with blood on her lip, staring him dead in the eye with a calm that made every single soldier watching realize, all at once, that they had badly misread who this woman really was. And by the end of that day, Commander Holt's career would be finished, torn apart from the inside out. Before we get into it, if the story's got you hooked already, do me a favor and follow this channel, because trust me, it only gets more intense from here. Smash that like button if you're feeling it, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. Now let's rewind and set the scene. Blackstone Army Air Base sat out on the edge of Carver County, wedged between high desert flatland and a mountain range that turned deep purple every night at dusk. It wasn't the biggest base in the country, not by a long shot, but during joint readiness drills, it pulled in troops from 4 different branches, swelling into one of the most crowded military installations around. 3 hangars, 2 airstrips, a med building that always smelled like burnt coffee and rubbing alcohol, and a reputation, the kind of place where soldiers came to prove something, whether to themselves or to somebody who once told them they'd never make it. Lieutenant Nora Vasquez had been stationed there 11 months. She ran the trauma unit, 6 beds, endless paperwork, and the kind of pressure that comes from knowing lives are literally in your hands when things go south. Most folks on base knew her face, not her name. The nurse in Bay 3, the medic who patched up Rhea's back in March. She wasn't cold, exactly, just focused, quiet. She showed up, did the job, and went home. What almost nobody knew was her real story. Buried in her service file was a completely different woman. 7 years in the Navy, 4 of those spent embedded with elite special ops evac teams in some of the most brutal environments the military had to offer. She'd been pulled out under enemy fire, not once, but twice. She'd performed field surgery in conditions that would make most ER doctors back home lose their lunch. She trained in close-quarters combat right alongside male operators. Same standards, same brutal cut. Not because anyone made her, because she flat-out refused to be the weak link on any team she was part of. She never talked about any of it. Not because she was hiding, it was all right there on paper, but because it just wasn't relevant to her life now. She was a trauma nurse. That was enough. 18 months back, after a quiet, no-drama conversation with her CO, she'd requested a change of pace, something stable, something far away from the sharp end of things for a while. She didn't spell out why. Nobody pushed. She packed up, drove to Blackstone in a rented truck, and started her first shift 3 days later. 11 months in, she was good, respected by her team, practically invisible to everybody else. And that suited her just fine. Now, the joint readiness event had been building for 2 straight weeks. 960 personnel, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, cycling through Blackstone for pre-deployment clearance checks. Not combat, just heat, waiting in line, red tape, and the friction that comes from cramming a bunch of branches who don't normally mix into one space. Nora's team got pulled in to help process medical clearances. Over 200 troops in 3 brutal days. Longer hours, bigger crowds, way less sleep. By day 2, the desert heat had become the main character of the whole operation. Hangar 1, the biggest structure on base, had been turned into a staging area, packed wall to wall, over 1,000 bodies when running at capacity. Folding tables lined the concrete floor. One measly water station sat against the east wall, and by 2 in the afternoon that cooler was already running dry. The line stretched near 40 feet, and the temperature inside had climbed past 94 degrees. Nora was out there checking on 2 of her junior medics posted at a first aid table. She'd already walked the hangar twice, spotted a couple of guys showing early signs of heat exhaustion, got them moved to shade, and was heading back toward the water line to grab a cup for herself before her next shift. That's when she almost didn't notice him. Commander Derek Holt came strolling through the south entrance with the energy of a man who expected crowds to part for him, and mostly they did. 6'2", built like he still trained hard even deep into his 40s, wearing his rank and his SEAL Trident like they were a permission slip he'd learned to use. His reputation walked in the room before he did. Decorated. High profile. The kind of guy whose name shows up in training briefs as the gold standard. Multiple deployments, commendations from top brass, and over the years, a public image that blurred somewhere between respected career officer and full-blown personal brand. But there was another reputation trailing him too, the quiet kind, the kind that never makes it into official paperwork, just gets passed between junior officers and enlisted grunts in hallways and break rooms, low voice to low voice. A reputation for treating rank like a blank check, for treating support staff, junior enlisted, anybody he filed under not important like they were furniture. Nora didn't know any of that yet. She was focused on her patients, third in line for water when Holt cut through the crowd. He didn't slow down. He moved along the edge with that shoulder-first swagger that told everyone around him he wasn't stopping for anybody. People shifted out of his path instinctively, the way folks do when somebody big is walking with intent. He reached the front, stepped clean past a young airman named Terrence Webb, a kid who'd been standing in that exact spot for 11 straight minutes, and grabbed a cup like Webb wasn't even there. Webb said nothing. He just stepped back. Nora watched the whole thing happen. She stood there a second, cup in hand, running the same quick mental math she'd learned to run in high-stress situations, threat level, options, likely outcomes. 900 people packed into that hangar. Senior officers everywhere. Heat already pushing folks to their limit. And Webb, barely 22, had backed off like a kid who'd learned the hard way that backing off was always the safer move. She set her cup down and walked forward. Kept her voice low, her hands at her sides, her face steady. Stopped about 6 feet from Holt. "Commander, there's a line." He turned and looked at her with the exact expression of a man who'd just been interrupted by something he considered beneath his notice. His eyes swept her rank, her scrubs, the medical patch on her shoulder, and something shifted, small but unmistakable. A quiet mental filing. Support staff, nurse, not worth engaging. "I'm aware," he said, and turned right back to the cooler. "Then you know you just skipped 40 people," she said. A ripple moved through the crowd. People who'd been zoned out from heat and exhaustion snapped back to attention. Heads turned. Holt filled his cup slow, deliberate, like he was making a point. Then he turned to face her fully, and something in his posture shifted. He was performing now, playing to the audience that had suddenly gathered. "Do you know who you're talking to?" he said, measured, not loud. "I know your rank," she said. "That's not what this is about." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that landed like an insult. "You should probably head back to your station, Lieutenant. This isn't really your lane. Standing in line is everybody's lane," she said. A few people nearby couldn't quite bite back their reaction. Somebody in an army uniform let out a half-laugh they immediately swallowed. Holt's smile held, but something behind his eyes went cold. He stepped in closer, not aggressive, just calculated, and dropped his voice. "You want to watch yourself, sweetheart. Base like this, the wrong conversation can follow you for a long time." Nora looked at him steady. "Was that a threat? Advice?" he said. She held his stare a beat longer than was comfortable for him. She could tell by the tightening in his jaw. "Get back in line, Commander," she said, and turned to walk back to her post. She didn't see his face change. She felt it in the way the whole crowd's energy shifted, in the sharp collective intake of breath, in how everything around her just stopped. She turned back. Holt had stepped forward. The performance was gone. Whatever internal switch he ran on had flipped, and now he was somewhere far more dangerous, not calculated anymore, just raw. He came at her fast, arm already swinging up. She had maybe a second and a half to decide. She made it. She held her ground. His palm cracked across the left side of her face hard enough to snap her head sideways. The impact rang through her jaw, her neck, straight to the base of her skull. Her lip split against her teeth, and the entire hangar went dead silent. Nora stood frozen for 3 full seconds. She didn't touch her face, didn't make a sound. She turned her head back to center and looked Derek Holt square in the eye, and she caught it, that flicker, that split second of satisfaction on his face. The look of a man who thought he'd just settled something. He was dead wrong. She raised her hands, slow enough not to read as a threat, deliberate enough that everybody watching knew something was about to happen. Not a guard exactly, something looser, more functional. The posture of someone who'd done this before. Maybe not recently, but thoroughly. Holt saw it and completely misread it. He stepped in again, already loading up for a second swing. She moved. What happened next wasn't a fight. That's the word people kept reaching for afterward, in statements, in reports, in hushed barracks conversations that stretched deep into the night, but it wasn't the right word. A fight means 2 people still fighting over an outcome. What Nora did was closer to a verdict. She'd already assessed, decided, and acted, with the precision of someone who'd spent years training for exactly this kind of split-second call under fire. She stepped into his reach instead of away from it, the last thing he expected, redirected his forward momentum using his own weight against him, twisted his center off balance, and dropped a single, controlled strike to the nerve cluster behind his right knee. His leg buckled. She followed through with a clean takedown using leverage and gravity, not brute strength. And Derek Holt, 6'2", 220 pounds, career Navy SEAL, a man who'd faced down combat in 3 separate theaters of war, hit the concrete floor of Hangar 1 like somebody had just flipped his off switch. He landed hard. He stayed down. The silence held another 4 full seconds before the room erupted, voices, movement, 900 people all trying to process what they just witnessed at the exact same time. Nora stood right where she was, hands lowering, breathing steady. Her lip was still bleeding. Her jaw would ache for a week straight. She could already feel the bruise blooming under her cheekbone. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't look angry. She just looked tired, like someone who'd done what needed doing and was already 3 steps ahead, thinking about what came next. What came next arrived in the shape of Sergeant Major Adeline Chu, cutting through the crowd from the direction of command with the energy of someone who'd seen the whole thing unfold and now had to handle it, professionally, calmly, despite the fact that nothing about this afternoon was going according to plan. "Lieutenant Vasquez," she said. "Sergeant Major, are you injured?" Nora touched the corner of her mouth. Split lip. "I'm fine." Chu glanced over at Holt, now being helped into a sitting position by 2 Rattle Jr. enlisted troops. He was conscious, functional, but visibly shaken in a way that had nothing to do with hitting the concrete. His face was doing something complicated. "I need you to come with me," Chu said. "Understood," Nora replied. She walked with Chu through the crowd that parted in front of her like the Red Sea, eyes forward, aware of every face watching but not meeting a single one. She'd been the center of attention in high-stakes moments before. She knew how to move through it without letting it slow her down. What she didn't expect was Airman Webb, the kid who'd been shoved out of line, stepping forward as she passed and saying, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "He hit her first." "Sergeant Major," she didn't start it. "He hit her first and she defended herself." Chu stopped cold. And then more voices came forward, almost instantly. A Marine corporal, a female Army Ranger, two Navy petty officers who'd had a clear line of sight to the whole thing, all saying some version of the same line, "He hit her first." Chu's face stayed unreadable, but she made a small gesture, half acknowledgement, half order, and said, "Get their names. Get statements." She and Nora kept walking. The command section had been set up in a corner of the hangar, folding tables, laptops, a makeshift privacy curtain for sensitive conversations. Smelled like industrial cleaner and someone's abandoned lunch. Chu sat Nora down across from her and pulled out a field report pad. Late 40s, short hair, sun-worn face. The look of somebody who'd handled hard situations for a very long time. "Walk me through it," Chu said. Nora did. Clean, chronological, zero emotion. The waterline. Her decision to speak up. The exchange. The moment his hand connected. She used the word struck, not hit. She explained her response in terms of threat neutralization and minimum necessary force, the exact language she'd trained in. Chu listened without cutting in once, taking notes the whole time. When Nora finished, she asked 3 sharp follow-ups. The sequence of Holt's approach, whether Nora had touched him first, whether she'd verbally threatened him before acting. Nora answered every single one clean. Chu capped her pen. "Okay. Then, who are you, Lieutenant?" Nora frowned. "I've been on this base 16 months, Chu said. "I know most of the people worth knowing. You're in trauma. You've been here almost a year. I know your face, but I don't know your file." She paused. "That wasn't some random defensive scramble back there. What's your background?" Nora thought about it a beat. 4 years attached to Special Ops evac teams before I transferred to a standard nursing post. Chu's pen didn't move, but something in her posture shifted. "So that's a non-standard skill set for a nurse. Cross-trained, CQC certified, trauma surgery in combat zones. It was a 3-year pilot program. I was second cohort." Chu sat with that for a second. Outside, the hangar noise was still elevated. 900 people still trying to process the afternoon. "Your file's about to become very relevant very fast," Chu said. "You know that." "I know. I'm going to be straight with you," Chu continued. "I've been doing this job long enough to know how something like this looks on paper before anyone bothers to find out how it actually went down. A decorated SEAL and a female nurse getting into it, that's a headline before it's even an investigation. The headline's going to be wrong." "I know," Nora said. "I'm going to make sure the investigation catches up to it." Chu said. "It's going to take time. Can you hold it together?" Nora looked her dead in the eye. "Yes." Chu studied her a moment longer, taking in the split lip, the bruise already darkening along her jaw. Whatever conclusion she reached, she kept it to herself. "Sit tight," she said. "Back in 20. She was back in 14, different energy this time, controlled but moving with real purpose. She sat down, opened a fresh folder, and didn't waste time. "Pulled your file," she said. Nora said nothing. 7 years Navy. 4 with SOET, deployed across 3 regions. Certified in emergency trauma surgery and close quarters combat. 2 extractions under direct fire. She looked up. "You've got a commendation from Admiral Weir. That was a long time ago. Still on your record." Chu set the folder down flat. "Commander Holt's currently in the med bay getting checked out. Bruised knee, possible mild concussion from the fall. He's also, according to 3 separate witnesses who've come forward in the last 10 minutes, been showing a pattern of conduct toward junior personnel throughout this event that predates today by a wide margin." Nora took that in without a flicker. "This isn't going to move fast," Chu said. "But I need you to understand something clearly, Lieutenant. You've got witnesses. You've got a service record proving exactly what your training is. And you've got the plain fact that a decorated SEAL laid hands on a fellow officer in front of nearly 1,000 people. She let it sit. He gave us a lot to work with." Nora was quiet a beat, then said, "I want one thing clear. I didn't do that to make a statement. I defended myself because he hit me, and I had every reason to believe he was going to do it again." "I believe you," Chu said. "I just want it in the record." "It's in the record," Chu said. "Exactly how you described it." She closed the folder. "One more thing, the witnesses. We're up to 14 so far. For different branches. All volunteered." She leaned in. "They're not going to let this get buried, Vasquez. And frankly, neither am I." Nora gave a single nod. "Now," Chu said, standing, "I need to make some calls. You're staying in the medical facility for the time being, not as a detainee, as a priority witness and an injured party. Need anything beyond what you've already told me?" "No," Nora said. "I need to check on my patients." Chu almost smiled. It flickered and vanished before it landed. "Your medics are covering the unit. I'll walk you over on my way to comms. Come on." The sun had dropped low by the time they crossed the open ground toward the medical building. The desert heat easing into that late afternoon burn where the air softens but the pavement keeps radiating everything it's soaked up all day. They walked in silence, Nora aware of every glance they were pulling from personnel crossing between buildings. Word traveled fast on base. It always did. She'd made peace years ago with being looked at in ways she never asked for, one of the quiet, persistent costs of being a woman in spaces still built, in all the ways that mattered, around a different default. She'd stopped trying to manage the staring and started focusing on what she could actually control. Her work, her judgment under pressure. Whether she let the looking shrink her. It never had. The medical building was cool and quiet inside. Her two junior staff, Specialist Rosa Delano and Corpsman Marcus Taft, were running the clearance station with the kind of locked-in focus of people who'd decided the smartest move today was to be visibly excellent at their jobs. Delano looked up when Nora walked in, and her face did something quick before she pulled it back to professional. "You okay?" "Fine," Nora said. "How's the queue?" "Running smooth," Taft said, eyes on his chart. 40 more before close of day. "Good. I'll be in Bay 3 if you need me." She stepped into the empty bay and just stood there a moment, breathing. The adrenaline was draining out the way it always did, leaving behind that specific physical inventory of a body that had been pushed hard and asked to hold it together anyway. Her jaw throbbed steady. Her lip had stopped bleeding. Her neck was stiff, and a headache was building behind her left eye. She ran cold water over a cloth and pressed it to her jaw, catching her reflection in the mirror above the sink. She thought about Chu's words. 14 witnesses. For branches. All volunteers. She thought about Webb, the kid who'd spoken up first, who'd said out loud exactly what needed saying in the moment it needed saying. She hadn't thought, walking toward that waterline, about what might happen next. She hadn't thought about her record or her training or how any of this would read in an after-action report. She'd thought about a young airman getting pushed out of line, and a big man who figured his rank meant he could take whatever he wanted. That was the whole of it. She folded the cloth, set it down, and sat to write her formal statement. She was on page 2 when Taft knocked and walked in without waiting, which told her something before he even spoke, because Taft never skipped protocol. "LT, 2 JAG officers and a colonel from the Inspector General's office are here. Asking for you." Nora set her pen down. That was fast. "Yes, ma'am." Taft hesitated. "There's something else." "Tell me." "There's a second complaint against Commander Holt, from before today. A staff sergeant from the 82nd filed a formal report 2 months ago. It got stuck somewhere in the chain." He paused. "The IG team just found out about it an hour ago." Nora sat with that for a beat. "Okay," she said. "Tell them I'll be right there." She capped her pen, straightened her scrubs, and glanced once more at what she'd written. 2 full pages, every moment from the waterline to the concrete floor to this room, laid out clean and complete. She picked it up and walked toward the door. Behind her, the cold cloth sat folded on the edge of the sink. Down the hall, 2 JAG officers and a colonel from the Inspector General's office were waiting with a folder far thicker than anything she'd expected. One that, within the hour, would reveal not just today's incident, but a pattern stretching back 18 months. 6 formal complaints from junior personnel across 3 installations, and a paper trail someone had worked very hard to keep buried. Commander Derek Holt was still in the med bay. He had no idea what was inside that folder. He had no idea that the woman he'd dismissed as just a nurse, the woman he'd struck in front of 960 witnesses, had just become the last domino in a chain that was now falling, and nothing was going to stop it. The folder itself was thick in a way administrative folders rarely were. Nora noticed the moment she stepped into the anteroom where the JAG officers and the colonel were waiting, not because she went looking for it, but because one of the JAG officers had it laid open on the table and was still reading, and he didn't glance up right away, which meant either he was deep in it or he needed a second to collect himself. Either way, that told her plenty. Colonel Priscilla Dane rose when Nora walked in, tall, early 50s, silver threading her temples, carrying the kind of posture built over decades inside institutional authority. The 2 JAG officers were Captain Elliot Marsh, who finally looked up from the folder, and Lieutenant Commander Sasha Brent, legal pad out, 3 pens lined up in front of her, radiating the energy of someone who'd been waiting a long time for a day exactly like this one. Lieutenant Vasquez, Dane said, "Thank you for coming down. Please sit." Nora sat, sliding her written statement across the table. Marsh glanced at it. "Your account of this afternoon?" "Yes. I was still writing it when your team got here." He pulled it toward himself and started reading without another word. Brent uncapped her pen. Dane leaned forward. "Before we begin formally, I want you to understand why we're here, and why we got here this fast. This investigation wasn't triggered by this afternoon. It was triggered by a complaint filed 2 months ago by Staff Sergeant Devin Pauley of the 82nd Airborne, one that got administratively stalled at the installation level. That delay is under review right now." She held Nora's gaze. "What happened in Hangar 1 today moved this whole thing from pending to active. You understand what that means?" "It means it wasn't just me," Nora said. "It means," Dane said carefully, "that today's incident is now the most recent and most witnessed event in a documented pattern. That distinction matters a great deal for how we move forward." She opened her copy of the folder. "We're going to ask you questions. Some about today. Some about things you may not have first-hand knowledge of. Answer what you know. Tell us clearly when you don't. Don't guess." "Understood," Nora said. Marsh looked up from her statement. "This is thorough," he said, and there was something in his tone that wasn't quite surprise but sat right next to it. "You wrote this in 40 minutes. I was a medical report writer for 4 years, Nora said. Accuracy under pressure is a habit." He nodded once and kept reading. The interview ran 53 minutes. They walked through every second in the hangar, the sequence, Holt's exact words, the strike, her response. Brent's pen never stopped, shorthand flying, catching everything the first time through. Marsh's follow-ups were sharp and precise, never hostile, but leaving no room for gray area. Then the questions shifted. "How long have you been at Blackstone?" Dane asked. 11 months. "Prior interaction with Commander Holt in that time?" "None. I knew him by reputation. Never spoke to him before today." "Did you know about any prior conduct complaints against him?" "No." "Any informal reports? Rumors, second-hand stories, anything off the record?" Nora thought honestly about it. 6 months back, a junior corpsman mentioned working a joint event where Holt was present. He called the environment difficult. Didn't elaborate. I didn't press. Brent wrote it down. "That corpsman's name?" Marsh asked. "Ramirez. Jose Ramirez. Transferred to Pendleton in March." More writing. Dane studied her for a moment, measuring, not judging. Nora had been sized up enough times in her career to know the difference. I'm going to be straight with you, Lieutenant, Dane said. Holt's legal team will have him lawyered up within the hour. Once that happens, the nature of the questions coming his way changes fast. Right now, his story is that you started the physical altercation. He's calling it self-defense. Something cold landed in Nora's chest. He hit me first, in front of 960 people. I know that, Dane said. 14 witnesses have already confirmed it. Security cameras cover about 70% of that hangar, and base logistics has already been ordered to preserve the footage. She paused. I'm telling you this so you're ready. This gets louder before it gets cleaner. Anyone you need to call? Family? Personal counsel? I'm fine. Dane studied her face. The bruise along Nora's jaw had already deepened. We're having a base physician document your injuries before you leave this room, she said. Standard procedure. It matters. I know, Nora said. Vasquez, Dane said, her tone easing off the institutional edge a couple degrees. I read your service record while we waited. 4 years SOET. Yes. Then you already know better than most people in this building. Investigations like this don't move quick or clean. She leaned in. Do what you've always done. Do your job. Trust the process. Nora held her gaze. Has it typically moved, Colonel? When the subjects got Commander Holt's profile. Dane went quiet for a beat. That, she said finally, is a fair question. The base physician who came to document Nora's injuries was a tired-looking major named Okafor. Efficient, professional, no unnecessary chatter, which she appreciated. He photographed the bruising, noted the split lip, checked her for concussion symptoms, filed the formal report, and handed her a copy. Ice that jaw tonight, he said. I know you know. I'm saying it for the record. He clicked his pen shut. For what it's worth, Lieutenant, half the space is already talking about what happened out there. He paused at the door. The half I've talked to are telling it a lot different than I'd guessed the commander's lawyers want. He left before she could respond. By 1900 hours, the readiness event had been formally suspended for the day, personnel dismissed to barracks, and Blackstone had settled into that specific charged quiet that follows something big. Noise down, tension up, conversations dying in doorways whenever certain people walked past. Nora was back in Bay 3 when Sergeant Major Chu found her. Chu dropped into the chair beside the exam table uninvited, wearing the frank, measuring look of someone who'd had a hell of a day. 14 witnesses is now 22, Chu said. There's also a full security footage review underway. Preliminary word from logistics, the angle on the water station caught most of the incident. She paused. Most, not all. Holt's attorney arrived 40 minutes ago from off-base, which means somebody called him early, and he's going to make noise about that gap in coverage. Of course he is, Nora said. The witness statements are solid, Chu said. But his team's going to try to spin the physical contact as mutual. Words like escalation, disproportionate response, that's the language they're building right now. He's 6'2", 220, Nora said. I'm 5'6", 140. He hit me first. I defended myself. I know that, Chu said. The witnesses know it too. But his legal team's going to spend the next 24 hours trying to reframe your self-defense as an assault by a trained combatant. She leveled her eyes at Nora. They're going to pull your SOET qualifications and argue someone with your training poses an unequal threat to an unarmed man. Nora let that land. It wasn't a possibility she hadn't considered, but hearing it out loud hit different. That argument, she said slowly, requires them to claim my training makes me dangerous and that I had no right to use it, while conveniently ignoring that a much larger man hit me first. Yes, Chu said. It's a bad argument, but it's the one they've got, so they'll run it. She leaned back. This is where your record cuts both ways, Vasquez. It proves your professionalism, your qualifications, your right to be taken seriously. But they're going to try to weaponize the combat piece of it. How do we counter that? The IG team's already on it, Chu said. Dane's done this before. And Polly's complaint coming back into play changes the whole shape of the narrative. She paused. Devon Polly, E6, 18 years, clean record. His complaint described deliberate misconduct, intimidation, 2 incidents of physical aggression at events where Holt was senior officer present. Filed properly. Sat in administrative limbo 8 weeks. She watched Nora's face. When a pattern complaint and a witnessed incident hit the same guy, it stops looking like a bad day. It starts looking like a behavior. That's a completely different case. Nora glanced at the far wall. What happens to Polly's complaint now? Gets elevated, Chu said. And Polly gets contacted. Dane's team's already reaching out. She stood. I'm gonna level with you about something else. Holt's got friends. Not just professional ones, people in high places who've built their whole image around operators like him. Next 24 hours, some of them are going to try making noise in directions that benefit him. Are you warning me? Nora asked. I'm prepping you, Chu said. There's a difference. She paused at the door. That airman, Webb, the one who spoke up first. I remember him, Nora said. He walked into the command section 30 minutes after the incident on his own and asked to give a formal statement. 22 years old, 2 years in service. Told them straight, Holt shoved him out of line, then struck a fellow officer with 0 provocation. Chu's jaw tightened slightly. His hands were shaking the whole time. He gave the statement anyway. I thought you should know that, she said, and left. Nora sat alone in Bay 3 a long while after that. The call came at 21:15, routed straight to her extension. Someone had gone out of their way to get her direct line. Smooth voice on the other end, the practiced cadence of a man used to steering hard conversations from a position of power. Lieutenant Vasquez, my name's Thomas Garrett. I represent Commander Derek Holt. Nora said nothing. I want to be straightforward with you, he said, deploying the word exactly the way lawyers do when they mean the opposite. My client has real respect for what happened today and acknowledges the situation wasn't handled with the professionalism either of you deserved. He'd like to propose a resolution, something that avoids a long public investigation. Frankly, it wouldn't serve either of you well. You're calling me directly? Nora said. On my work line, I'm acting in good faith to explore options before formal proceedings kick off. Mr. Garrett, Nora said, your client hit me in the face in front of nearly 1,000 people. I defended myself. The IG office has an active investigation that predates today. If you want to talk to me, go through the JAG officers on this case, not a late-night call to my work phone. A pause. And for the record, I'll be reporting this call to Colonel Dane's office in the morning. Another pause, longer. Lieutenant, if you just consider, she hung up. She logged the time, the name, and every detail of the call with the same flat precision she'd applied to everything since the hangar. Then shut off the lamp and went to try to sleep. She slept badly, but she slept, that was something. By 05:30 she was back at the medical building reviewing the next day's clearance queue. The readiness event was resuming at 0800, and regardless of the storm swirling around her, her team had a job to do. She was grateful for something concrete to focus on. Delano walked in at 0600, took one look at Nora's jaw, now deep purple-green, and said, LT, you need that rechecked. It's a bruise. It's a substantial bruise. Delano hesitated. People are talking. I know. Not in a bad way, Delano said carefully. Just talking. There's a whole crew on base who've dealt with him before. Not just Polly. Guy in 3rd Battalion filed something last night. Chu's office had issued a base-wide statement at 2300. General misconduct investigation pending, Commander Holt administratively suspended from deployment prep, and they'd put his name in it, which apparently they only did when they wanted people to know it was serious. Nora absorbed that. They put the name in when they mean business, she said. Delano studied her. You okay? I'm working. That's not what I asked. Nora set her pen down and looked at her, 26, 2 years incompetent, the kind of medic who always asked the second question. I'm managing, she said. That's accurate. By 0800 the hangar had refilled, and the readiness event was back in motion. Quieter this time, more careful, everybody aware something had shifted in the base's social gravity. Nobody sure yet where the new lines sat. Nora moved through her day locked into her usual rhythm. Clearances, documentation, 2 minor training injuries, professional, precise, aware of eyes on her, aware of conversations dying when she walked past and resuming after. She didn't let it become a problem. She kept moving. At 10:40, a tall woman in Army Ranger insignia fell into step beside her, mid-30s, moving with that deliberate economy Nora associated with people who'd spent serious time in hard places. You're Vasquez, she said. Yes. Staff Sergeant Kazia Olamide. 2nd Airborne. She paused. I knew Devin Pauley. He filed that complaint because 3 of us told him he had to. We were at the Fort Dawkin joint exercise 18 months ago. Holt was senior officer present. She stopped walking, and it wasn't for effect. She was deciding how much to say. I filed one too. The rest of us didn't because we were junior and we'd all seen what happens to people who file formal complaints against operators with his profile. She paused again. I've been on this base 6 days. Heard what happened yesterday, and I walked into Colonel Dane's office at 0700 this morning. Gave a statement about Fort Dawkin. She looked at Nora directly. I'm not the only one from that exercise here for this cycle. She stopped. Just wanted you to know that. Nora studied her for a moment, the steadiness in her face, the look of someone who'd made a decision and wasn't second-guessing it. Thank you, Nora said. Don't thank me, Olamide said. I should have done this 18 months ago. She walked off. At 13:30, Nora got summoned to Brigadier General Marcus Teal's office, the actual administrative building, not the hangar's command section. She'd never met him. She had no idea why she was being called in, and the not knowing was its own kind of tension. Teal was a big man in his late 50s, gray-cropped hair, the stillness of someone who'd learned to conserve energy over a long career. Sit down, Vasquez, he said. He studied her jaw. That needs to be on the permanent record. Major Okafor documented it last night. Full photos. Good. He clasped his hands. I'll be direct. I got a call this morning from Vice Admiral Claude Farron's office. Nora kept her face neutral. Farron was Holt's administrative superior. That name carried weight. Framed as a courtesy call, Teal said, a flag officer checking on the welfare of a decorated member of his command. I've been doing this long enough to know what that call actually was, an attempt to apply pressure. Yes, Nora said flatly. I told the Vice Admiral's office this base is under active IG investigation, and any communication about the subject of that investigation goes through legal channels. He paused. Then I called Colonel Dane and told her about the call. Why tell me? Nora asked. Because you should know this base's command structure isn't going to participate in any effort to influence the outcome. I want that explicit, not implied. He leaned in. One more thing off the record. I've commanded for 19 years. I've seen this story end badly for the person who should have been protected. More times than I'm comfortable admitting. I can't guarantee you an outcome. Nobody honest can. But I can promise you what happened in that hangar isn't getting minimized on my base. He held her eyes. Understand? I think so. The Vice Admiral's office will try again, Teal said. Different channel, probably. That's how it goes. When it happens, you do exactly what you've been doing. Document everything. Trust the process. Keep doing your job. Nearly word for word what Chu had told her the night before. It should have felt reassuring. Instead it felt like the outline of a much bigger problem several experienced people were quietly trying to head off. She thanked him and walked back into the heat, processing everything. when her pager buzzed. Trauma transfer, Bay 3. A Marine gunnery sergeant, 12-foot fall, blunt abdominal trauma, blood pressure crashing. She hit the door running. Working alongside Delano, she stabilized him fast, internal bleeding, a probable splenic injury, no time to waste. Get a medevac in the air, she snapped at Taft. Call ahead to Carver Regional. Probable splenic laceration, hemorrhagic shock. She worked with the calm, brutal efficiency of someone who'd done this in places with no backup, no equipment, and no room for error. The chopper lifted 18 minutes later, her patient stable enough to survive the flight. She stood in the prop wash after, running the mental replay she always ran. Nothing missed. Nothing wasted. Just after, an agent named Renata Flores caught her in the hallway. Federal, composed, careful with her words. A ghost keycard had just accessed the base medical records room, pulling Nora's own file. Someone was trying to build a weapon out of her service record before the investigation could frame it properly. That night, a federal evidence preservation order landed in Nora's hands, her name already on the signature line. She signed it. Within hours, physical records seized from Naval Operations Command Pacific confirmed everything. A 3-year pattern of suppressed complaints, all funneled through the same administrative choke point, a man named Commander Gerald Speake, working 2 levels beneath Vice Admiral Claude Farron himself. A second officer, Commander Richard Waller, had been the one who broke into the records room, sent to Blackstone hours before the investigation scope had even been discussed in the formal hearing, which meant Farron's office had known what was coming before anyone official did. Waller was detained. He talked. Speake, terrified of being the last man standing, walked into a federal field office with a lawyer and a fireproof case of private documents. Direct written instructions from Farron's own aide, ordering complaints buried by name. The dominoes were falling now, and nothing could stop them. The formal hearing convened 2 days later. Nora testified for over an hour, laying out exactly what happened with the same flat precision she'd given every time before. She didn't shrink from her training. She owned it completely. The training is designed to keep people alive when help isn't coming, she told the panel. I used the minimum force necessary to stop an active threat. I didn't maximize the response. I ended it. She sat through testimony from Devon Pauley, from Kasia Olamide, from a woman named Carla Meeks who spoke for 37 minutes with her hands folded and her voice dead steady. By the time Holt took the stand, his composure was cracking under the weight of 6 names, 6 complaints, 3 years of silence finally breaking open. Farron's office tried one last move, a procedural sleight of hand meant to stall the ruling 72 hours. Nora and Flores caught it within the hour. A phone call placed 17 minutes after a recess, followed by a transfer of authority designed purely to buy Holt's team more time. It didn't work. The delay was invalidated in 9 hours flat. The preliminary ruling landed the next morning. 11 pages, dense and procedural and utterly clear. Commander Derek Holt, guilty of a documented pattern of misconduct, abuse of command authority, conduct unbecoming. The hangar assault, unprovoked, unambiguous. Lieutenant Nora Vasquez, cleared completely. Lawful self-defense. She read that paragraph twice, not because she needed to, but because her body needed the weight of not yet to finally lift. Holt's special operations designation was stripped that same morning. No deployment, no command, just a slow, grinding walk toward a military tribunal, with Speake's documents and Waller's confession stacked against him like concrete. Vice Admiral Farron himself was placed under federal review, the man at the very top of a 3-year cover-up finally facing the consequences of the system he'd built to protect himself. 3 weeks later, General Teal addressed all 960 troops in that same hangar. He named the findings plainly. He praised the witnesses who'd come forward, the ones who filed complaints and watched them vanish and came back anyway to say it all again. That, he said, is what institutional integrity looks like when it actually works. Not a system that's perfect, a system that works because people inside it refuse to let it stop. Nora stood near the back, remembering the moment 3 days earlier when a 22-year-old airman with shaking hands had said 5 words that changed everything. He hit her first. Not her training. Not her record. Not the takedown that dropped a decorated SEAL to the concrete. Just one scared kid telling the truth in a room where silence would have been so much easier. She was offered a new role days later, building trauma protocols for the whole base, a position built specifically around her. She said yes, not for the recognition, but because she understood now what the real work actually was. Showing up, staying honest, refusing to let broken systems stay broken. On her last evening before the readiness unit shipped out, she walked the flight line alone, watching the desert sky burn gold, then amber, then that deep, ancient orange that swallows the whole horizon before dark. She thought about every person who'd stood up when it would have been so much easier to stay quiet: Webb, Olamide, Polly, Meeks. She thought about the ones who never would and carried that weight too. Some people wait for the world to make room for them. Nora Vasquez never had. She built her own room, quietly, one honest moment at a time, because real strength isn't the loudest thing in the room. It's the thing that doesn't look away. She hadn't looked away. It was everything. It always had been.